Hello, this is Christopher and welcome to today's podcast. In this episode, I will be joined by Darragh as we discuss the attack on the US Capitol that occurred last week and the events that ensued last month and the attacks that ensued in the time subsequent to that. So, we will start with discussing the events that occurred on the run-up to this evidently horrific attack on the United States Congress and democracy as a whole. So as I'm sure everybody is aware by now, Donald Trump has been persistently claiming that the election was stolen from him, that there was somehow mass levels of voter fraud occurring due to the latency in key states such as Pennsylvania and Georgia declaring their final results. And as I'm sure many people are also aware by now, that like most of Donald Trump's statements, he was unable to provide anybody with credible evidence that anything of the such actually occurred. He didn't just fail convincing the democratic law-abiding citizens of America to have respect for the democratic process, that it was rigged. His trustworthy, state-of-the-art lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and other lawyers failed at convincing the judiciary system in 34 election lawsuits, all of which were denied, dismissed, settled, or withdrawn, and none of which found any evidence of voter fraud. Is there anything in that, Conor, you'd like to discuss, just speaking on the fact that there were so many court trials and there was no evidence of voter fraud found whatsoever. We know that voter fraud occurs on a state level regularly in most countries, but is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, there was 2 cases of voter fraud found in Pennsylvania, which ironically, actually, they both voted for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. There was also Sidney Powell, who was so delusional as an attorney on the state-of-the-art defense team, as you put it. Rudy Giuliani actually had to fire her from the team. That's how extreme she was, and she was talking about Venezuelan voting machines and them changing votes.
That is a whole new level of insane. But despite the countless rulings by many different courts, Donald Trump, as we all know, continued to insist that the election was in some way taken from him. This starkly leads into the next event that unfolded, the Wednesday in which it occurred, just before midday on the 6th of January. This was the day Congress were meeting to confirm Joe Biden's election victory. Donald Trump decided that this was the perfect opportunity to hold a rally at the Ellipse near the White House, in which he in which he called Save America. But if the title wasn't bad enough, he continued on to state, "We're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue, and we're going to the Capitol, and we're going to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, the kind of pride and boldness that they need to take back our country." Just a basic note, he never walked with these people to the Capitol. He went back to the White House and he watched as the chaos, which he incited, ensued over Washington, D.C. Is there any initial thoughts of that, Conor, that you'd like to add to the table?
Well, there was not just himself at the rally. There was Mo Brooks of Alabama, Rudy Giuliani, who called for trial by combat, and Donald Trump Jr., whose words were probably even worse than his father's.
So after all that occurred, by 1:10, the mob had arrived just in front of Congress, violently assaulting law enforcement, and even nearby media. There was video footage of Trump supporters attacking cameras and destroying them. As a result of this, tear gas was used in an attempt to quell the unrest. Law enforcement struggled to maintain control over the mob as it penetrated the front lines and began to advance on the building from multiple fronts. Arriving at the Capitol building, mass levels of vandalism occurred, as I'm sure everybody's seen on the news. There were windows smashed in. There was pieces of furniture completely destroyed. So after a further advancement, the Senate was forced to abandon the process of confirming the election results as Congress entered a lockdown. So I'm sure, as you've seen, Conor, photo, video and eyewitness accounts provide us with evidence of the rioters roaming congressional halls. Is there any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's quite ironic, actually, that they were shouting USA while trying to invade the capital of the United States and hoisting a Confederate battle flag in the halls of the Congress. Since then, there have been some very serious charges levied at them by prosecutors, such as sedition charges or conspiracy to commit sedition, which has a sentence of up to 20 years in the United States. There's also a theft of federal property, someone who stole Nancy Pelosi's meal, the Speaker of the House, and her lectern as well.
Photo and video evidence also showed us that there was a man in Nancy Pelosi's office with his feet propped up on her desk, which is, an ultimate sign of disrespect from my point of view. There was also a barbaric man covered in fur, face paint, and wearing a Viking helmet, acting like a crazed animal. I'm sure that's nothing new anyway. Most Trump supporters tend to act like crazed animals on the daily. Additionally, a noose was erected in front of Congress, basically in an a petty attempt to intimidate senators into, I don't know what they expected, into, undoing the election results. I don't see the logic behind that. At this point, the door of the House were locked with a makeshift barricade as security officials and guards attempted to defend the legislative chamber from being overrun. Shortly before 3 p.m, gunshots were reportedly fired inside the building. Later evidence showed us that a female rioter was unfortunately shot as she attempted to break through the barricaded doors of the Speaker's lobby. She later died from her injuries, sadly. Even after all of the following events occurred, democracy proved its strength and persevered as senators eventually returned to the building and resumed the business of certifying the results of the 2020 presidential election. Surprisingly, I was surprised how long they set and actually certified the results. At 3:41 in the morning, Joe Biden's victory was confirmed by the Senate. So I'm sure you feel, or many people feel the same response to this, that it was a disgusting attack on democracy and had adverse consequences. In the wake of it, 5 people were left dead. In turn, 5 families and friends mourning for loved ones. It also sent shockwaves across the globe as many of us watched in dismay. And even some world leaders went as far as to condemn Donald Trump for having provoked this crowd upon the Capitol. It was something that I'm sure shocked many, many people. Now that we have discussed that, I'd like to hand it over to Connor to talk about the aftermath of this event.
Yeah, well, it was met by kind of universal condemnation from world leaders to Republicans in Congress and governors. For instance, Larry Hogan, the Republican governor of Maryland, he criticized it. Also, Liz Cheney, the number 3 Republican in the House, she's the chair of the caucus, and the daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney. She has said that Trump summoned the mob, assembled the mob, and lit the flame of this attack. And she was one of the first Republicans to call for Trump's removal, along with Adam Kinzinger, a Republican congressman from Illinois. And they were among 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump for incitement of insurrection. It's his second impeachment of his term and the first president to be impeached twice. One Republican said that never has there been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States.
On Adam, the congressional man, I actually remember he was on, I think it was ABC or MSNBC, and he was giving his point of view that he wants to be on the right side of history after the book has been written and closed, and that he feels what he did was right, and if he did not vote for impeachment in the House, he would almost feel responsible in some way for Donald Trump if he ever did win office again, being able to take federal office.
It's quite frightening the amount of support he has in the House, Donald Trump has in the House, and the Republican caucus. But even saying that, Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, he is a staunch Trump loyalist who voted to overturn the election. But he said that the president was somewhat responsible for the attack, but he also had ironic calls for unity after it, considering it's ironic because he was one of the people who voted to overturn the election and also signed on to a lawsuit in December to the Supreme Court to overturn the election results in 6 states. This all led to an impeachment vote just a week later, where 10 Republicans voted to impeach, leading to a 232 to 197 vote. That is coincidentally the same number as the first impeachment of Donald Trump.
Briefly looking at the vote, I remember whenever the impeachment the impeachment was first going ahead, the vote in the House of Representatives, many suspected that around 4 to 5 Republicans were suspected to vote in favor of impeachment. But I actually remember I was texting you at the time, Connor, and we were surprised that it had actually reached 10.
Yeah, because I think the previous reporting had put at half a dozen, 6, as the maximum amount. And that's what I thought it was going to be. And I was quite surprised to see that an additional 4 came out of that. But I was also kind of surprised that someone as high up as Liz Cheney in the chain of command couldn't also garner more support in the House. But the Republican Party over the last couple of years has left me quite disappointed time and time again. Also, condemnation on the Senate side. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, she has a record about voting against Trump. She voted against the repeal of Obamacare in 2017, and she called for Trump's resignation immediately following the insurrection. She said he has caused enough damage, and says the House did the right thing with impeachment.
Generally, just speaking, many people in the House felt almost obliged to vote for impeachment because it was a direct assault on democracy, and undoubtedly we did watch Donald Trump encourage this type of violence and misbehavior.
Yeah, definitely, because this has been 4 years in the making of hateful speech and angry speech from Donald Trump. In 2017, a few months after he took office, he did a speech at a police station or police precinct, where he told police officers to not be afraid about roughing up suspects and call for the supporters to attack people at rallies, and said he would pay for the legal costs. And what the phrase that was going about a lot was, it was surprising but not shocking. That does sum it up really well.
Yeah, most definitely it does. I think, many people were suspecting violence would hit America in the wake of Biden winning the election. But it wasn't obviously surprising, but it shocked many people that it would ever reach this degree, that the polarization over the years of American politics had actually reached the level where people were suffering and democracy before our very eyes was being destroyed.
Yeah, it's frightening, because even here in the UK, we do look over at America as this sort of beacon of hope and whatnot, but it was really shocking and quite scary to see these people in the halls of the Congress attempting to overturn the election. And even since then, we've found out about that there was actually a conspiracy here, that this wasn't just some wild mob, but there was some planning that went into it, including members of the Republican caucus in the House who were indicted in this by Ali Alexander, who is a Trump loyalist, and he said that he received help in the planning of this from Paul Gosar of Arizona, Andy Biggs of Arizona, and Mo Brooks of South Carolina. And there are 3 congressmen who apparently actually helped him in this, and that was what he said himself.
We can really see the Republican Party starting to almost cave in on itself in terms of speculation on just who's going to lead the party into a state of ease, because Donald Trump undoubtedly left the party in an absolute mess.
Already, even before this, there were Republican senators trying to use this, or use Trump's base as a platform for a 2022, 2024 run or 2028 run. Like Tom Cotton, who's a senator from Arkansas. He went up to Iowa, which everyone knows is the first state in the primaries for a presidential nominee for a party. And he started making a name for himself up there, campaigning for Trump after the election. And Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, they were the 2 who were leading the charge to overturn the election results. And again, then too trying to use this to their political advantage. And Josh Hawley was seen giving a supportive fist bump to the crowd before the insurrection. It's quite shocking to see.
There was also I forgot exactly what state he was representing in, but he had wishes to go to Congress, but he was actually a state official. And he's since been removed because it was the guy who was holding the phone and he was videoing the entire chaotic scene, and he was supporting it.
West Virginia state representative, and he was arrested a few days later, and he resigned his post the day after that. Mm-hmm. So it's incredible, this grasp that Donald Trump has over the party, that even elected representatives were not immune to doing this.
I guess one of the things I was laughing at the time in which this happened was the fact that, the representative for, was it West Virginia you were saying?
Yes.
He wished to go to Congress one day, and people were saying, well, he did go to Congress, just not as he expected to go to Congress.
Yes. Even there was it's quite funny, was there was a Texas real estate magnate. She is a wealthy woman she's a very strong Trump supporter. She took her private jet to DC to attack the Capitol. And while she was at the Capitol, she was just yelling at people to call her if they need to buy a house. And then she took a private plane back to Texas.
Capitalism at its finest.
Yes.
Is there anything you'd like to wrap up with there, Connor?
A lot of people talking about what criminal repercussions could come from this. And legal experts have essentially said that it's extremely unlikely that any of the people who were at the rally or who spoke at the rally could be charged for incitement, because the United States courts have a very, very high bar for incitement. And they actually cite that there was in the 20th century, a Ku Klux Klan member spoke at a rally and was talking about he wanted to attack black people and do this and do that. And the crowd at the rally actually went and did it, but he didn't actually talk about them going, and it was put down as a political speech. And that's essentially what the cover is for incitement in America.
It's quite a high bar, especially now that there are plenty of conservative judges appointed by Donald Trump from his last term. So I'm happy enough to leave it at that. You too, Connor? Yeah?
Yeah, happy with that.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us in today's podcast. Make sure to have a nice day, and if you want to, know any additional points regarding the attack, make sure to have a bit of a look into it. Thank you.